Hi, welcome back to another Dungeon Master Design discussion. I'm Daniel,
I'm Scott.
and tonight we are joined by Fran, my daughter. Uh, I told her that her questions are invaluable on stream when we have done streams together before. So she was like, all right, maybe I'll join you. So, as a budding DM, she's here to ask questions perhaps that you guys may or may not want to ask yourselves.
Maybe.
This came about because a Twitter thread, and I said, I have thoughts on this. So the next time we have a down week, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to try not to rant. If you guys have anything to say, stop me.
You got it.
But one of the things that I wanted to hit on tonight is the fact that a lot of this stuff in world building, city building, stuff nobody's going to see. Your players aren't going to, or likely not going to see it. At least the stuff that I'm going to talk about. And the stuff that I want to talk about is stuff that's important for a city to exist and thrive. Like the infrastructure, food, water. These things are important for a city. Where does the poop go? Is the question that you should ask. And a lot of cities that you'll find, like in online postings, just like if you search city map or D&D city map or whatever, a lot of them don't have, obviously, a lot of these things. And if your world is medieval European analog, probably doesn't have a sewer, unless it was first built by Romans, or a previous civilization that has fallen, which is common in a lot of D&D. That's sort of the baseline. We are not where we once were. So roads, everybody gets. When people draw a city, everybody draws roads. I mean, most people do.
Yeah.
Sewers tend to follow the roads, but not all the time. Where does the food come from? And a lot of ancient cities and some modern ones are getting back to this. In fact, there are some cities in China that the city has mandated a certain acreage of food production within the city limits. And a lot of indoor farming has been taking off there. And Singapore especially that's taken off. Their hydroponic farming is booming. Water is a big deal. It's at the forefront of our thought process here in the Southwest. Who has access to it? Where is it coming from? Is there enough of it? So these are not only important things for a city to live, but also potential plot points. Points of conflict. Because threatening travel, cutting off roads, blowing up bridges, setting up an illegal toll over a bridge, um, damming a river, poisoning a well, uh, the well running dry and needing to dig another one. Um, Food is less problematic in D&D, as is arguably water. And when I first started thinking about this, I was going to be dogmatic. Your city has to have a river. It's got to be near a river or a lake or some body of water. But then I was like, well, I mean, that's not necessarily true. Our cities certainly aren't.
Right.
Most cities do have some kind of flowing fresh water nearby, but aqueducts are a perfectly viable possibility. Wells, a lot of settlements in like the Sahara are built around wells or oases. But D&D or any game with magic where one of the spells is create food and or water.
Yeah.
Uh,
Just puts the power in the hands of a select group of people,
yes.
which is,
You understand.
still realistic.
You understand how and why the clergy have power. Yeah, exactly. And
Which
also
brings us back to the medieval European archetype.
yes. And we're druids, especially if you want to have like a city druid, or that has that interface. A city with a druid or a few druids is so much more secure, just because the druids can make the fields bloom.
Yep.
Like that's sort of the power of hydroponics. Is the growing season is always. So, like in sort of traditional farming, in mid-latitude climates, you might get 2 growing seasons a year, or 2 crops a year during your growing season. You'll plant something late winter, early spring, harvest it in summer, plant, and then harvest again in the fall, and then lay fallow. But if you have a longer growing season, maybe you get 3 plantings.
Yeah.
And if you have druids controlling the weather, making the plants grow with magic,
Creating the water.
yeah. But if you're going to make that choice, make it consciously, if that makes sense, and not after the fact.
See, now I'm getting this idea for just like this like little encampment, like mini town city, but it's like this crazy druid cult leader type. He's controlling who gets the food and who gets the water, and like a little D&D Waco.
Yeah. Yeah. Which actually leads into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is why is the city here? This one sometimes is answered when people design a city, sometimes it's not. And the easiest fallback
Is it's where the DM needed a plot point to resolve.
yes. But a trade city, a port city. But generally, port cities don't just pop up because it's a port. In America, that kind of happened, but mostly because when the colonizers came, they needed a place for their boats to come in. So that's where they settled.
Yeah.
But when you're not looking at a colonizing settlement pattern, port cities grow up because there's food in the water, and or there's power to be taken from the river. But yeah, and yeah, Rose, these are the kind of things that I think about, like the powers that don't necessarily break economies or world building, but have particular influence on them.
Yeah.
Now, I thought about doing design your city and have a document open, type, maybe draw. I threw out the idea of drawing immediately because I didn't want to draw with my mouse.
Okay, that's fair.
Thank you. And then as I was prepping for the show tonight, we are, of course, in a different setup as from what we normally are. And so my keyboard was not wanting to connect. And I decided I didn't want to fight with it. So we may do a collaborative city build.
At some point.
Just, I won't be writing it down as we do it. And one of the things why I'm talking about that is because you can design a city without drawing a map. You can design a city by drawing a map first. There are multiple ways to skin the cat, as it were.
What do you find you usually do when designing a city? Map, or pick out a location on a larger map that you want a city, or
Damn. I think the truth is the map, but only just, if that makes sense. Because like when I'm designing a city, usually it is I have a bigger map, world, continent, kingdom, whatever the zoom in size is, and I need a town or a city there. And so I usually start with that. And then from that, I look at geography, or what geography do I want the city to have? Where are the high points, the low points? And then I start sort of drawing and designing it around that.
Gotcha.
And I always, if I'm drawing a map, I start with water and then have an idea of the elevation. I don't always draw the elevation, but I have it in my head sort of where this is going to be a low point, this will be the high point.
Right.
And generally the high point's where the fortification goes.
Yeah.
That's why you always make your fort in the middle.
Yep. Sometimes, I don't know, because I think about all this sort of all at the same time, I don't necessarily have like a step-by-step process. I just sort of do it all at once. And then when I pass through, that's when I sort of go through the checklist. Do I have this? Do I have a well or a water source? Do I have where the food is coming from? Even if it's not nearby, I just know this road here goes out to the farmland. You know, where how does it? Here's one that almost nobody thinks about. Who, how, and where are the taxes collected? Most feudal structures, the lord taxes the peasants directly and collects his own taxes or has somebody collect them for him.
Right.
But in cities, that's not really. How do you take 10% of a shoe shop? You know? How do you make sure that that guy is paying his taxes? A lot of medieval towns got their money from merchants by essentially the same way that conventions get their money from merchants, which is you pay up front. You want to have a stall in the marketplace, you want to have a shop on the marketplace, you are going to pay up front a set amount of money. Other ways are tolls. I am a big user of gate tolls. So the frequency of the taxation would depend. And generally, what would happen is the Lord would say, okay, how much money do I need this year? What's my tax base? Divide it up, send them a tax bill, and then they just pay on it as they can. And usually, especially for farmers, you're not getting their taxes until harvest time. And sometimes a little after. Unless you're taxing directly in food. So that farmer that you know has 100 acres of wheat. He's going to give you probably 400 bushels of wheat. Because it should produce, I think, wheat is about 40 bushels an acre. And this is the weird stuff that you get into Googling. Like, you know, how much food does a person eat? How much land, how much does this crop produce on this type of soil? Yeah. You go down, I've gone down some rabbit holes.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that. Just sort of eyeball it, and if it's close enough, it's close enough. Yeah. The next thing to think about is who's in charge. You don't have to detail them at all. You don't have to stat them out or anything. You may not even need to name them, especially if your party is just sort of traveling through. Especially if they are working for somebody that this guy is going to be working for. But if you want local political intrigue or the guard to be involved in whatever story you're going to be telling in this town, you need to know who the authority figures are. Is there a separate court? So is there a separate judge from whoever's in charge? Is there a professional, organized guard? Because that also has not always been the regular case. Mostly throughout history, rich folks buy people to protect their stuff, and those are the guard. Poor folk have to protect their own stuff. however little it is. So keep that in mind. The idea of a police force is a modern one, largely, or you only find it in cities of significant size in history. Um, after you've answered who's in charge, is it important? And this gets back to how much interaction are your players going to have with it. I tend to fall back on political intrigue in my games. Strength or weakness. It's just sort of where my brain goes easily, and I can spin it out quickly. So I tend to use that more. But again, if you don't have any particular reason for your players to interact with the powers that be, don't bother with it very much. This is this comes back to the idea of rendering. You are the GPU, the CPU. Your resources are taxed. Render only what's in front of them. You can have the matte painting in the back be, impressionist if you're just sort of, it's there. Trust me.
Yeah.
I feel like they're specifically telling me that because I tend to overthink everything.
I don't mean to target you, but you are the youngest DM here, so if I address my comments to you, that's fine.
I mean, fair.
I
mean, I didn't say you were wrong to do it.
The connections to the city. Where, how do I want to? So one of the ways that I think about a city is it is its own organism. And a good analogy is a slime colony. It will fill its available space and reach out feelers for additional nutrients, resources, and place to grow. So where that's going is an important thing to think about. If you are going to have your city surrounded by enemies, it's a frontier town, fortification, surrounded by all manner of nasty things in a dark forest. And there's supposed to be an elf city over here and a dwarven city over here that eons ago traded with each other and with this town. And since the dark times have come, that doesn't happen anymore. And your players are going to be reestablishing these connections. It's important to know what those were, where they are. Was there a paved road, or was it just a trail, and now that trail's grown over? Did a druid at some point come in and make the plants grow to break the paved road? And it's all overgrown now anyway, even if it was paved. So, yeah.
Druids are scary and powerful.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why, for a little bit with the one world that I was making, I kind of thought of having just a bunch of druids terraform the planet because it wasn't stable for life when they got there.
And that's the thing I've done in Spelljammer campaigns is the Empire that be has a cadre of druids to terraform worlds that they find.
Yes. Oh man.
Who better?
I mean, it's quite literally their thing.
Exactly.
I thought it was a TNG episode, but it's not. It's a Deep Space Nine episode where they have a terraformer come to the station, and Cisco falls in love with his wife, who's psychically projection. But the dude is an arrogant SOB. And now I just kind of want to play a druid that's like that dude.
Yeah.
Oh, you should have seen this grove I made on Alture. Marvelous. People come from all over to see that grove. Or the Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yeah.
The dude that's remaking Earth. I always thought I had a talent for fjords.
Oh, back into Critical Role.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to think about your city and when you're designing it. Like I say, there's the slime aspect that you can connect it to, or mushrooms, or ant colonies. I drew a lot of inspiration from ant colonies when designing some dwarven cities. And ant colonies are great because they're organized. They tend to be somewhat orderly. Some are more so than others. But also, some species of ants farm.
Yeah.
They bring stuff down into the hive to feed their fungus farms. And they eat the fungus, not what they're taking into the hive. They have trash piles. They have a place for the poop to go.
See, now I've got an idea for like a conflict between myconoids and thrycrane.
Yeah. As the fungus becomes sentient and doesn't want to be eaten anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's stuff like that as you sort of think, and this is something I'm dealing with in the game design that I'm doing right now, with the sci-fi game that I'm designing, which originally was going to be to play in the Twilight Imperium universe, but I really, really dislike some of the stuff in that universe. And so I was like, I think I want to trash that and just make it my own. But different species, different creatures require different things. And their cities will reflect that. And also who they come into conflict with and when. If you have a nomadic city, like the Mongols basically have, or had, 30,000 people and their animals moving, if there's no one else around, that's not a big deal.
Yeah.
When they come close to a city, that can be a big deal, because they start putting all their animals on the farmland that the farmers that are supporting the city.
Right.
So yeah. Illithids don't care about crops. They don't care about anything really except eating brains.
Right, but how do you harvest the good brains? You get them to eat the right foods.
Isn't that kind of like the Promised Neverland-ish? No.
But yes,
I'm
it is
not
like
good at talking loudly.
That was pretty good.
it is like the Promised Neverland. Yes. Spoilers if you haven't seen that anime. Which brings me to the next thing I wanted to touch on, which is a lot of questions that I see in threads often are resources, inspiration. Where do you get your ideas, or what how? And I wanted to touch on games, specifically the strategy games, city sims, that you can play are the greatest tool, I think, in your toolbox if you're going to be designing cities or anything, just because, and different games present it in different ways, and not all of them are so nitty gritty. But games like Banished, um, Frontier something, I think. It's a new one in early access. I haven't played it, so that's why I'm drawing a blank on it. Where you have resources to gather that your city, that your population needs to upgrade, your buildings, to get better buildings, to, this hamster wheel of civilization that we like to simulate. Games like City Skylines or SimCity, where you have to build your sewer system, not just your roads. City Skylines doesn't have a food aspect. You don't have to grow food. They just have commercial goods, and just call it that. Call it good at that. But yeah, same kind of thing. RimWorld as a base builder is kind of good. Although I don't know if I necessarily go to that for inspiration, so much as a inspirational palate cleanser, if that makes sense. Do you have any specific or non-specific questions?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Do you have anything to say that I haven't covered?
No. I mean, for me, I start out kind of the same way. I have the larger area, and then how, where do I want my big cities to be? Where would be spots that smaller settlements might pop up? And I also kind of think of the history of the world that I'm putting this place in. Like, I'm currently working on a world. I had an idea that needs a ruin somewhere near the heart of the world, and what cities would pop up around that. And basically what it is actually inspiration from the Tower of Babel.
Mm.
But like there was one race, and they were building this Tower of Babel-esque thing. There are different interpretations as to what that was, but and the way that instead of just confusing languages, that's how all the different species, races, lineages came about. Is okay. Now some of you are orcs. Now some of you are elves. Now some of you are halflings, and that's how the races came to be on that world.
Interesting.
Which also solves the problem of why you can have half species. You're all from a common stock.
Yeah. Yeah. That was always one of my favorite things about Shadowrun.
Yeah.
That it was Homo sapiens robustus
Yes.
for orcs. Yeah.
I think that's a big part of if you're designing, if it's like your homebrew world, it's the history you've created for that world. It's going to maybe preclude or exclude townships from being in specific areas.
Yeah.
Whether it be this is, from where an ancient city was, or hey, now there's a new city on top of that one. Like Troy had like 9 cities on
12.
12. I know it was an inordinately
I think
large
the
number
last-
for one specific location to have.
The last number, I believe, is 12.
But things like that can also go a long ways to that city planning. Like you have a Troy-like city. Okay, what was the city underneath it like? Is it like Futurama? Can you be in New York and go down to Old New York? Old New York.
Yeah.
Where,
generally, ancient cities that are built atop one another, like Troy, it's because they were raised.
Right.
But I think it's Jericho. Currently holds the confirmed record for longest single inhabited location of humans.
Yeah. And that's another thing. What is the architecture in a city like that look like, where it's been around so long that people have added new buildings on top of or renovated old buildings, and you still have the old architecture plus new architecture.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I get into the overthinking, is the history of the world and how it affects the city and other things in that location.
Yeah, I guess for me, I do some of that. And
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
Our last Araku campaign, I did that a few times. Where they came upon the ruin of a layer tree city, which is where Dragonborn and dragons live. They're massive cushion plants. Also, they came across a settlement, only like a dozen buildings at most.
Yeah.
Inhabited by goblinoids. And they managed to get in, and they see this, large sort of circular building in the middle, surrounded by other buildings. And then they go in and they see, hey, that's a control panel from an elven ship of some kind. So, and slowly they begin to uncover clues as to this was a elven settlement built around an escape pod. where all the elves were killed. The goblins say they have no idea what happened. When they got here, it was empty. I think you guys eventually put it together that it was the dragon you were going after.
Yeah.
That killed.
Yeah, I believe Grass put that together.
Yeah. So yeah, the mystery of a place is also really fun to play with when you're designing a city. And I have to caution you, or perhaps give permission, maybe. I don't know. You don't have to have the answer to the mystery.
Oh, no. Sometimes the best mysteries are the ones you've got no clue, and you figure it out by listening to the player's hypothesis of what it could be. Like, I like that. That's going in.
I mean, yeah, we've done that, but also very purposefully, once or twice. You can't do it all the time because then it's no fun.
Right.
Because people, if they're looking for answers, they want one. But like, if this weird thing that you just want to have in the city, this just weird thing, and you decide that it's been there forever, it's in the oldest histories of the city. Maybe no one knows where it came from originally. No, if nobody knows, nobody knows. And my favorite response to give as people are investigating and putting clues together, so long as it's not turning into a red herring or anything, or just, if we don't have a plot to get to. And this is something that they're interested in exploring. Eventually, it would come to a point where they hit a dead end. There's no evidence further to gain. They propose something. Seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Was that what happened? Seems reasonable. You don't know.
Yep.
Well,
and that can be frustrating because sometimes I'm like, okay, is he saying that's reasonable because I'm on the right track and haven't got enough information, or is he saying that's reasonable because that's all I'm ever going to learn? Usually I can tell, but there are moments when I'm just like, okay, which one is it? And then usually that preoccupies my free time thinking for the rest of the week till the next session.
Yep. Got about 15 minutes. We're on a hard out tonight because four-sided dive is on. I'll let either one of you answer that first. Do you have a favorite city? That's how you. I don't know if you can see all of it.
Some of it is behind the camera. But I think I can read all.
Okay.
Not particularly like a city that I've designed, but the druid cadre that I had for that, my Empire equivalent, in the Spelljammer campaign I ran years ago, back in high school, so decades actually. But just the whole structure I had for the Empire,
Yeah.
and that organization and how they went about and settled things, and I'm sure I'm not the first one to have thought of that, but in my brain it was original thought because I hadn't seen that before. So I was
Yeah.
like, this is awesome.
Well, I mean, usually druids are cast in the light of protecting nature.
Yeah.
Whereas casting them in the terraformer role allows them to participate in colonization as well.
Yeah.
You've had some stuff that you've talked to me about, like that you're designing, and we haven't played in it yet. So I don't know if you want to talk about any of that.
I don't know. I don't know what you're referring to. I have way too many ideas.
The industrial
The lab?
maze, yeah.
I mean, I haven't really done anything for that.
I don't know if that necessarily counts as a city,
I don't think it does.
but
I was thinking about the question and I was like, I don't really have any cities that would fit. Because I haven't really made any.
I mean, yeah. I guess some of your efforts have been consigned to kingdom level stuff or small stuff.
Or stuff that isn't necessarily supposed to make all the most sense and where things are. Because that's the treehouse. Things are kind of just connected.
Right. So, I have in my fourth world setting, I have 7 sacred trees of the elves. Most of them are kilometer-tall trees, based on different species. With the city built in the boughs and in the roots, around the roots. I am a fan of many of those. I set my novel in one. It starts in one of those. There is a city that it's kind of a holy city, and it's dedicated to the pantheon of gods on Fourth World. Originally built by dragons, all of the pyramids in this complex, and the other races added on after. That one I like. I have a particular fondness for. I think my recent favorites are from the last Araku campaign I was running. I have a fondness for the undead ship that you guys found. And the Dragon City nearby. Just because that one I think is probably the most detailed and largest dragon settlement I've detailed. And it was fun to get into that. Made up of 4 large layer trees up the side of this mountain, near the top of which there's a lake of lava where the ancient red dragon dwelled. And his daughter was ruling the city, and she had her own little pool of lava in her section that you guys went in and talked to her. And the fun part of that one for me was interconnecting all the clans. And they have no idea because they never discovered any of this. This is the part of the stuff that I say at the top of the stream, stuff that no one's ever going to see. I went through and, okay, there's going to be, I think I had 5 clans in the city. And some of the people who gave you their surnames, if you would have been paying enough attention and taking notes, you would have eventually probably been able to track it. But, like, dragons, because on Araku, kobolds, dragonborn, and dragons are all the same species. They just express phenotypes differently based on how much dust is in the environment. And I don't know if I told you after. I don't think you guys figured out. I think I told you after we stopped playing. The kobold that she sent with you was actually her son.
No, I don't think you've been told us that.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
I mean, he did say some things where it was like he was more than just yeah.
He carried himself with much, perhaps more dignity.
To be fair, that is a typical trait of kobolds in general.
Fair enough. This guy just had it back up.
This guy just had validity to his posturing. Yeah, no. If you had mentioned that, it was on a week I was absent or something, because, this is the first I'm hearing of that.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
But, yeah. As Rose says, well, we love live war drops.
And again, this gets back to how I fall back on the political stuff, that my brain just sort of weaves it very quickly. I can do a whole network of things. One of the things you guys didn't know about that town is in the tree that had where they grew their rice. Their rice paddy fields were watered by a decanter of endless water.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, and I have yet to successfully place this choice before the players, and this was an opportunity that it was possible to with that town. But the idea that there's a magical item in this village, town, hamlet, whatever size you want to do this. It's easier if it's a smaller place, because the temptation is greater if the population is smaller, for your players to steal this thing that's giving life to the town.
Yeah, no. If we had found out about the decanter, we would have gone after it. I was the captain of the ship. It would have happened.
Yeah. Yeah, and like one of the fun things about designing the dragon cities on Araku, for me, is the draconic layer effects. Especially if you start to think about what happens if you have a white dragon, a red dragon, and a blue dragon in this same city. Because on Araku, they don't necessarily fight the way they do in other D&D worlds. And they have a tendency to coexist more. But their layer effects still happen. So you can have situations where, like if you have the silver, white, or maybe gold, you can argue. But like a silver or a white dragon with a red, bronze, or gold, possibly. Their layer effects combine in such a way that the settlement now has water regularly. Because the white dragons draw the cold and the ice, and the red dragons melt that ice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of this constant flow that regulates things in such a way. The way that I thought about it, actually, is Prometheans in World of Darkness.
Okay.
If you have a group of Prometheans, their Azoth sort of levels out if you have one of each type.
Right.
And they don't drive as many people crazy. And their environmental effects aren't as bad. So, yeah. But I'm trying to think. I don't know, what do you think of the city that we were playing in? Nordfriedland. Did you like my Offal pit?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I put my idea of, where does the poop go, where does the trash go, center stage in the town that I set the campaign at. We were just running. And there was a monster an ooze in the Offal pit. Basically, any offal, waste parts of animals, trash, whatever, got put into this depression in front of the castle. Not directly in front, but just between the castle and town. With the idea that it was going to wash there anyway, so just put it there. And over time, certain things happened. An ooze developed because I didn't want to use an Atiug. So I designed my own monster. So that was fun. And also, like, different ways that you can sort of build out the inhabitants. The old man with the boggle living in his house. They're a level 5 party. There were 6 of them. I kept them occupied for 3.5 hours. One boggle, which is a CR 1/8 creature.
Interesting.
In one longhouse. And sort of uncovering some of the history of this old guy that's in this house. Which I don't think you guys got the full picture of. I didn't come out and state it, what was going on, but
Yeah, I don't think so. Lots of things. Or not famous. Was it?
Fun.
Yeah, Feywild.
Okay.
Well, yes.
Trying to remember where everything goes and everything in that world, because there's
Specifically-
like 4 or 5 religions.
Specifically Vanaheim.
Yeah.
Because where they're playing is Norse related. So Vanaheim is the Feywild there. So, yeah. Trying to think if there's any other particular city that... I did kind of like the city that Cohort was from.
Yeah, I like that one.
The canals.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The one I'm interested, if we ever go back to Araku, or when we do, is what settlement, if any, popped up around that place we took, the Dragonborn crypt,
Oh,
where the first gem dragon.
the Gem Dragon was born. Yeah.
I'd like to see what came of that. That's the main piece. Like I love that campaign, but that's the main piece that I always like. What happened? I need the epilogue.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just
So when we
introduced a
go
whole new
back,
dragon.
keep that in mind for your planning. I want to know.
I mean, yeah, we introduced a whole new dragon to the world, so
Yeah.
kind of want to.
Species.
Yeah, you want to know what happens with that.
All right, but that's all time we have tonight. Hopefully, you guys got something out of this. Hope you did. But we're gonna go enjoy Four-Sided Dive, and we'll see you guys next week, where we will talk about Critical Role Campaign 3, Episode 39. Thanks, guys.